In the blood-soaked pages of history, tyrants are often born to rule. Princes groomed for power. Generals forged in war. But this is not their story. This is the story of a man who was never meant to rise. A man who began not as a noble, but as a number, as property. In the early 1300s, the Indian subcontinent was dominated by a colossal force. The Delhi Sultanate, a mighty empire stretched from the snow-capped Himalayas in the north to the golden sands of Gujarat in the west and deep into the jungles of the Deccan in the south. And sitting at the very top of this empire was one man, Sultan Alauddin Khalji. Alauddin was not your average ruler. He was not merely a king. He was a storm, a man forged in blood, paranoia, and absolute will. He had ascended the throne through murder, assassinating his own uncle to seize power. And once he had it, he ruled with an iron grip. Ruthless in war, relentless in politics. His campaigns against Mongol invasions were legendary, battles that shattered entire armies, leaving rivers clogged with corpses. Under his rule, Delhi became a fortress of terror and wealth. His palaces were filled with gold, his court with spies. His enemies were erased, their families purged. No one was safe, not even his own kin. He ruled not just with might, but with fear. The kind of fear that made courtiers bow too long, that made generals sweat behind armor, that made betrayal almost impossible, but not quite. In the year 1299, Alauddin launched a campaign into Gujarat, a wealthy region ruled by Hindu kings. It was a brutal invasion. Temples were looted, cities razed, and thousands enslaved. And among the captured was a young Hindu boy. His name, as history would remember it, was Malik Kafur. He was likely in his teens, tall, strikingly handsome, with intelligent eyes that observed everything, and he had something more important than charm, added, adaptability. This was a boy who understood, from the moment chains were put around his neck, that survival would depend on more than submission. It would depend on becoming essential. He was purchased by a general of Alauddin's army for the staggering price of 1,000 dinars, an enormous sum for a slave. That price became his nickname, Hazar Dinari, the 1,000-dinar man. He entered the Sultan's court as nothing more than a servant, but within a decade, he would become something far more dangerous, not a servant of the empire, but its master. Kafur was placed in the palace, perhaps as a page or a personal servant, but he didn't stay anonymous for long. He was clean, eloquent, and unnervingly observant. He learned quickly. He remembered everything. And more importantly, he obeyed. Perfectly. Alauddin noticed. Some say it began with curiosity, others say with affection, a few whisper something darker, obsession. Either way, the Sultan, who trusted no one, began to trust the one person who had no family, no army, no power. A slave. The chronicles of Ziauddin Barani, a court historian, later wrote that Alauddin fell madly and deeply in love with Malik Kafur in his final years. Whether it was love, manipulation, or both, the bond was unbreakable. Within a few years, Kafur was no longer cleaning robes. He was commanding armies. Kafur led expeditions deep into South India, into the Deccan, where no Delhi army had ever dared to go. Cities like Warangal and Devagiri fell before him. Temples were looted. Gold, jewels, war elephants, all poured back into Delhi like rivers of wealth. Alauddin was ecstatic. The slave had become his war machine. But it wasn't just military success that made Kafur dangerous. It was loyalty. He had no ambition beyond the Sultan. Or so it seemed. Every victory made him more powerful. Every enemy he crushed gave him more authority. He rose to the position of Naib, the second most powerful man in the empire. Above princes, above generals, above everyone. But power, as it always does, comes with risk. And Kafur knew this empire wasn't going to be his forever, not while the Sultan's sons still lived. A slave can rise, a general can command, but a dynasty does not forget. Alauddin's health began to collapse in 1315. The once unstoppable tyrant became paranoid, frail, slipping into fevered dreams and delusions. His body rotted with illness, and in his weakened state, the palace that once bowed to his will became a nest of vipers. Factions formed around his heirs. The eldest, Khizr Khan, was a popular prince. Charismatic, strong, admired. He was married to the daughter of Alp Khan, a powerful noble and military commander. This was the natural successor to the throne. The court knew it. The nobles supported it. But Malik Kafur saw it as the beginning of his end. He wasn't royalty. He had no claim. If Khizr Khan became sultan, Malik Kafur would be cast out, or worse, executed. And Malik Kafur had tasted power. It was not something he would give up willingly, so he did what he had always done best. He adapted. He whispered. He forged letters. He spread rumors. He twisted truth into poison and let it drip into Alauddin's already fevered mind. "Your son is plotting against you," he whispered. "Alp Khan has a private army. Khizr is a traitor waiting to strike." Day after day, night after night, he isolated the dying sultan, convincing him that the very family he had built was planning his downfall. And it worked. The sultan turned against his blood. The boy he once cradled in his arms, now a conspirator. His trusted general Alp Khan, now a traitor. The sultan gave the order. The guards arrested Alp Khan. He was executed without trial, his head displayed as a warning. Next came Khizr Khan. He was lured out of the capital, his return denied. When he rushed back to see his dying father, he was Ari Kasted at the gates. The Sultan embraced him, a brief flicker of fatherly love. But Malik Kafur was there, whispering again. "This is an act," he said. "He's here to kill you." The Sultan, delirious and broken, gave Kafur everything: power, command, and the authority to imprison his own sons. The princes were taken to the dark fortress of Gwalior. Their mother was placed under house arrest. The court was silenced. The path was clear. Malik Kafur, the slave from Gujarat, was now, in every way but name, the ruler of the Delhi Sultanate. And he was just getting started. He had built his rise on loyalty, but to keep the crown, he would now build his legacy on fear. The fortress of Gwalior loomed behind the captured princes, a prison built not of stone alone, but of betrayal. And while the sons of Alauddin Khalji were locked away, a man born in chains now ruled in silence. But his reign had only just begun, and what came next would turn blood into legend. The royal court of Delhi, once a stage of grandeur, had changed. It no longer echoed with the voices of nobles and strategists. Now, silence reigned, the silence of fear. Sultan Alauddin Khalji was still alive, barely, but his mind was adrift, drifting between lucidity and madness. His body withered in a bed he no longer recognized. His empire, once unshakable, had fractured into factions that whispered in corners, stared too long, and bowed too little. And through it all, Malik Kafur sat at his side, never leaving. He was no longer merely a general. He now acted as vizier, bodyguard, nurse, and mouthpiece. But behind the quiet servitude was a predator preparing the final strike. He had removed the sons. He had executed Alp Khan. His rivals were gone. The only thing left was the throne itself. But even now, the old tyrant lingered, and though his breath was weak, his memory sometimes returned, and in those moments, he asked questions. Where is Khizr? Why can't I see my sons? Why is my wife locked in her chamber? Even madness, it seems, has clarity. And clarity is dangerous to the ambitions of a man like Malik Kafur. A living heir, even in prison, was a threat, a potential rallying point, a symbol of resistance. Malik Kafur knew this, and knew that as long as the princes lived, he could never truly wear the invisible crown he had forged. So he made the final, horrific decision. In a letter sealed with the Sultan's name, whether genuine or forged, none could say, Kafur issued a secret order to the fortress at Gwalior. Blind them. There would be no public execution, no spectacle, only pain, silence, and darkness. In a cold, isolated stone cell, Khizr Khan, the rightful heir to the Delhi Sultanate, was pinned down by guards. A glowing iron rod, heated in flame, was brought to his eyes, and with no trial, no farewell, the boy who was born to rule was forever marked. His younger brother, Shadi Khan, suffered the same fate. Two princes, two symbols of legacy, now reduced to groaning shadows in a prison that would never let them see light again. A blind man cannot be a king. In the 14th century, eyesight was more than sight. It was sovereignty. It was legitimacy. Kafur didn't just remove his rivals, he erased their future. The news returned to Delhi like a poisoned wind. Alauddin, once a symbol of terror across India, now lay half-mad and helpless. Some say he wept. Some say he raged. Others say he simply stopped speaking altogether. And a few, only a few, whispered that Malik Kafur delivered the final blow himself. A cup of wine, a dose of herbs, a quiet death in the night. Whatever the truth, on January 4th, 1316, Sultan Alauddin Khalji, conqueror of India, breaker of Mongol armies, terror of the subcontinent, died in his palace. No funeral procession was announced, no grand declaration made. The empire that once trembled under his feet now trembled under certainty. The storm had passed, but what came after was something worse than chaos. It was silence, a vacuum of power, and into that vacuum stepped the slave. The very next morning, Malik Kafur made his move. He appeared before the court with a scroll. It was, he claimed, Alauddin's final will, naming not Khizr Khan, not Shadi Khan, but a boy barely 5 years old, Shihabuddin, Alauddin's youngest son, as the next sultan. It was an absurdity. The child could barely speak, but Kafur didn't care. That was the point. He crowned the boy with a ceremonial turban, placed him on the throne, held a public ceremony. Trumpets were played, officials clapped politely, but everyone in that court knew the truth. The boy was a puppet, and the puppet master was a former slave. Kafur was now regent, in practice, the new ruler of the Delhi Sultanate. And he wasn't done. He approached the widowed queen mother, the boy's mother, and forced her to marry him. Whether through blackmail, coercion, or simple brute political force, she became his wife. He was now not only the regent, but the stepfather of the sultan. He had not just stolen the throne. He had married into it. In the space of a single day, the slave had become king in all but name. From the outside, Delhi continued as usual. Markets buzzed, coins changed hands, call to prayer echoed. But inside the palace, terror ruled. Every morning, Kafur held a staged audience with the child sultan sitting beside him. He'd smile, offer decrees in the boy's name, and then dismiss the child. The moment the door shut, his smile vanished. He summoned ministers, issued arrests, ordered executions. Nobles who had whispered doubts vanished. Generals who questioned his legitimacy were sent to the provinces, or never heard from again. Entire families were disappeared. Even minor court officials who had been close to Alauddin were interrogated, tortured, or bribed into silence. And Malik Kafur, the man once known for his loyalty, was now completely alone at the top. The throne of Delhi sat in marble and gold, but beneath it were bones. And Kafur knew, if he stopped moving, if he showed one moment of weakness, he'd join them. There was only one loose thread left: Mubarak Khan, Alauddin's teenage son, the last surviving boy who still had eyes. He was young, yes, but Mubarak was clever, brave, and more dangerous than the blinded ones. He was the final heir with royal blood and unbroken sight, a symbol that could ignite rebellion in an instant. Kafur gave the order, arrest him, and just like the others, he was imprisoned and prepared for blinding. But this time something unexpected happened. The executioners sent to blind the boy hesitated. The palace guards tasked with the blinding were no ordinary soldiers. They were the pikes, the elite household troops once loyal to Sultan Alauddin himself. Men who had guarded the Sultan in battle, who had carried his banners, who had pledged oaths of blood to protect his family. And now they were being asked to destroy the last son of their former master. Mubarak Khan, in chains, looked them in the eye. He reminded them of their oath, of his father's legacy, of the madness Kafur had brought to the palace, and, finally, he offered them something more tangible. From around his neck he pulled a jeweled necklace, priceless, heavy with gold and rubies, and he threw it at their feet. He said, "A slave who betrays his master will surely betray his servants." That was all it took. That night, in February 1316, the guards made their move. Malik Kafur was sleeping in his private chamber, surrounded by only a few trusted guards. One of the pikes, allowed inside due to his rank, stepped close to the bed. A dagger hidden under his robe. With one swift blow, he struck. The others followed, swords drawn, faces grim. The man who had ruled through whispers and fear was given no chance to beg. Malik Kafur was beheaded in his own bed. His body was thrown into the courtyard. The palace doors were opened. Mubarak Khan was freed. And with that, the reign of the slave was over. 35 days. That was all it took. 35 days of terror, betrayal, blood. And then, silence. The empire rejoiced. Mubarak Khan was celebrated. The guards hailed him as a savior. Ministers bowed. His name was sung in the streets. He was appointed regent for his little brother, the child Sultan. But like his father, and like Malik Kafur before him, Mubarak Khan had boasted real power, and he could not let it go. Within months, he ordered his little brother, the same boy who had been crowned by Kafur, to be blinded and imprisoned. And so the cycle continued. Treachery breeds treachery. Blood begets blood. Mubarak Khan became Sultan Mubarak Shah, but his reign, too, was short. 4 years later, he was murdered by his own lover and general, a man named Khusro Khan, who then briefly seized power before being killed in turn. The Khalji dynasty collapsed, the empire fractured, and all the glory Alauddin had built, all the wealth Kafur had won, was scattered in blood. And what of Malik Kafur? His name never appears on coins. No monument was ever built for him. No tomb remains. His body, they say, was dumped without ceremony, as if history itself wanted to forget him. But they couldn't. His story lingered in whispers, in legends, in fear. Because power, once tasted, cannot be untasted. In the shadows of every empire, there is always a Malik Kafur.